Let's pick up right where we left off, which is part 7 of our series here, How Journalism Killed Itself. You got the intro to this. What ended up happening next? Number 7 is the consolidation and corporate influence over news reporting. That's the next thing to happen. We got consolidation and corporate influence over news reporting. So what exactly does that mean? This is another issue that you may not have thought of when looking at what's taking place here. And if you don't work in the space or you don't listen to people who talk about working in the space, you may have never thought about this. So let me explain what I mean. News networks, as I've already told you, they are big conglomerates that are often corporate structured. These are very big organizations. One thing you should understand about corporate structure, any of you who works in corporate, you already know what I'm about to tell you. Things move very slowly in the corporate space. Corporate space is also highly bureaucratic. And there are certain things that you are allowed to say and that you better not say if you would like to stay in that space. In other words, you're working in corporate, there are certain things you can't say. And there are certain things that you better say. There are certain things that you can't go along with. And there are certain things you have no choice but to go along with, or at least you have to be quiet, even if you hate it, and basically grin and bear it if you are going to work in a corporate space. This is the way it works in these places. And any of you who works in corporate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There are certain things that, again, you got to go along with, you got to get along with, you got to say, you got to not say, and you got to just hold your tongue, even if you want to say something else, depending on what it is, if you want to stick around. This includes the news you report on. When you work for a corporate organization that has a news company within it, there's certain news that you can't report if you're going to work for this company. And there's certain news that you better report if you're going to work for this company. And there's certain news that if it doesn't exist, you better go create it if it works in this company. There's certain news that even if you have it, you better not report it if you work at this company. This is the way corporate works. Corporate is not objective. The corporate space is not objective. You can't just say what you want to say and do what you want to do in the corporate space. So if you call yourself a journalist and you're going to go work for some corporate owned organization, you can't really do journalism, because eventually you're going to come across a story that as a journalist you're supposed to report, but you can't because of who you work for, or a story that doesn't really exist, but they're going to pressure you to report on it or make a story out of it because of who you work for. This is the catch-22 of being in corporate. This is the reason why I did a series explaining to you why Baldwin is not corporate. All right, I told you why I'm not corporate. I did a 3-part series, episodes 30, 48, 30, 49, and 30, 50, explaining to you why I'm not corporate, because this is one of the reasons. This is one of the reasons right here, is that I am not good at going along to get along. I'm not good at holding my tongue. I'm not good at pretending to be down with something that I ain't down with. And I won't do it. This is the reason why I'm an entrepreneur. And the reason why some of you who are in corporate, you're going to be an entrepreneur sooner than you think you will be. Because eventually, this stuff ain't going to keep working. And it's hard to do this whole doing what corporate tells you to do when your personal integrity and your professional integrity is a better word I should have used there. Your professional integrity is based on telling the truth, because you decide to be a journalist, but now you're working for a company that says, well, you can't tell that truth because that makes the people we're cool with look bad. Right? So you can't tell that truth. So now what do? Are you going to compromise your journalistic integrity for your paycheck? Most people do. I ain't mad at you if you do. There are many people out there who compromise their integrity of the thing that they signed up to do so they can keep getting a paycheck to do it in a compromised way. And I just don't like the concept of being compromised, which is why I can't do corporate. I can never have a job working at a corporation. I just can't compromise. And I'm going to say something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to call something out. I'm going to point something out. I'm going to not talk when I'm supposed to talk. I'm going to talk when I'm not supposed to talk, and it'll be over. I wouldn't last a week in corporate. Actually, I wouldn't even make it through the interview process, let alone have a job. So if you're dedicated to actually telling the truth and you work for a platform that doesn't want you to tell a certain truth about a certain person or a certain space or at a certain time, what do? This is a question you must answer. See, there's another reason why a lot of journalists can't work in corporate spaces anymore while maintaining the integrity of their roles. You can't do both. You either got to compromise some integrity to keep the job, or you got to compromise the job to keep the integrity, but you can't do both. It's a big problem. And as news networks lose money because they're losing eyeballs to social media still, so despite all the stuff that the news networks did, the shucking and jiving they did to try to compete with social media, they still lost, and they're still losing money. Despite all of that, the companies still get, what happens is the companies they get purchased so that they just don't completely out of business. Somebody buys the company, and they'll buy a couple of companies, and they'll consolidate them all into one organization. And there are fewer and fewer of these organizations. And the issue with there being fewer of them is that they're no longer competing against others for who's being most objective and who's telling the most truth. Because if there are only two options, well, you only got two options, which means we're going to tell you what we want you to tell you. And if you don't like it, where are you going to go? You ain't got that many other choices. So you see how this works? This is the squeeze that's being put on the minds of the people. This is why there's a guy named Alex Jones. He has a platform called InfoWars. Some of you have heard of this guy. Alex Jones has been using the term InfoWars for a couple of decades now, not years, decades. Alex Jones has foreseen where we are right now. He saw this 20 years ago. He saw it 25 years ago. He saw it before 9/11. You can find video of Alex Jones predicting 9/11 before 9/11 happened. All right, go look it up. You can see it. And I'm bringing him up to say this. He calls his platform Information Wars because he understands that there was an information war way back in the day. We're just all catching up to it. He knew about it before the internet was in everybody's pocket. We're just now finding out that the information war is a real thing. And when I say just now, I mean the last 10 years. He was talking about this in the 90s, everybody. So as these companies get consolidated into having a certain view, because there's only a few of them, and they have a certain view, humans have views, only a certain way of reporting and only certain information can be shared, and they want it done a certain way. So there's less diversity of opinion, fewer places you can trust to give an unvarnished truth. And if one place is lying, there's no one to check them on their lie because there's no competition. See, everybody understand what I'm saying here? This is what happens. This is what is happening. And this is what will continue to happen. Moving on to point number 8. We're talking here today about how journalism ate itself alive, how it destroyed itself. Number 8, all of this has led to, and even though all of you who are listening to this, maybe you haven't thought this out in the steps that I'm laying them out, but all of you, I believe, has felt this, that not every platform is being objective. A lot of journalists aren't being objective anymore. Many of them have turned to influencers while still calling themselves journalists when they're actually influencers. And many of you have felt this, even if you haven't been able to quite articulate it or put your finger on it. All of it has led to one thing that you do know, is that there's a decline in the public trust of journalism and the news industry. We don't trust the news nearly as much as we used to. When we want information these days, we don't immediately turn to the news and say, well, hey, I heard something happen. Let me turn on the news and find out what happened. Because we know the news be giving us some bullshit. These days, many of you, when you hear something happen, you go to the internet and social media and your trusted sources and figure out, what does that person have to say about it? What does this platform have to say about it? Because at least I believe they're going to tell me the truth. You may not know, but you believe they're telling you the truth. You don't really know something unless you've seen it with your own two eyes. So you have to decide who and what you want to believe. So who do I believe to tell me the truth? And often ain't CNN or NBC. And that is a reflection of the fact that you don't trust the news the way you used to trust the news. Maybe because you have options, also because you've seen some things and heard some things from them that say, wait a minute, they lied about that. What else are they lying about? See, that's the thing. Reputation can be destroyed very quickly. And as soon as someone realizes you told them a lie, well, now they're going to start questioning everything else you ever told them, even if everything else you ever told them was the truth. If they uncover one lie, they might start thinking everything else you told them was a lie, even if it wasn't. See, this is the issue with losing trust from anybody, is that now it's hard for them to trust you with anything else. I've already beat this point up plenty through the first 7 points of the series, but as I said, most of us have news platforms in our minds that we don't listen to anything that they say because we know that they have a reputation for leaning things a certain way and not telling the truth. All of you can name a platform that you think fits that description. They'll tell us what they want us to know, when and where and how they want us to know about it, and will even chastise you for questioning it. Have you seen this? All right, y'all remember that virus from a couple of years ago? How many of you heard or saw someone chastising others for not accepting the quote unquote facts that were being told to us? Hey, you take this shot, there's no way you can get the virus. All right, that was a lie. If you don't take it, there's going to be a winter of death and despair. That was told by the White House, the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris White House. That was a lie. Again, it wasn't, they didn't know. No, they were lying. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were, what's the word? Incentivized by the pharmaceutical companies who spent a lot of money. The more people took that shot, the more money those pharmaceutical companies made. Those pharmaceutical companies spend millions of dollars lobbying DC politicians to be able to share the message that they want shared. Any of you didn't know, now you know. Now, that right there is a reality of what's happening. That's not a lie, that's the truth. So any of you who took the shot, understand that maybe you wanted to take the shot, you would have took it no matter what, but understand that the reason that the shot was so popular a few years ago is because the companies who were selling the shots, every free shot you took, they got paid. Yes, that's how it worked. They spent a whole lot of money making sure that the message got out through every platform they could possibly get it out through. If you didn't know, now you know. All right. Yes, they will use money to play with your health. That's what they'll do. This is how it works now, folks. Problem for these networks is they still tend to think that people like you and I are beholden to them when it's actually the other way around. They think that we need them when it's actually they need us. People these days are smart enough to see through their bullshit and simply do not trust mainstream media platforms anymore, or at least not nearly as much as we used to. And this tends to trend. The younger people are, the less they tend to trust these mainstream platforms. Older people may still trust them because through their formative years and even their youthful adult years, that was the thing that they did. They watched the news and that's where they got their information. So people my parents' age, my parents are in their 60s, they will still, when they want information, they'll watch the news. I remember I was talking to my dad and he was like, well, I watch some of MSNBC, then I watch NBC, then I watch Fox, and then I watch CNN so I can get a balanced version of all the news. Sorry, that's a bunch of bullshit what he said, but he grew up in an era where watching the news was how you got your information. So I understand that he's in the mindset that he's in. But somebody who's 20 years old is not looking at those platforms for news. You're looking at, you got these 3 people you follow on TikTok, these 10 people you subscribe to on YouTube, and these 4 podcasts you listen to. That's how you get your news. Completely different way of looking at things. And this is where we are right now. People are smart enough these days. I'm talking people who are actively looking for platforms. Smart enough these days to see through their bullshit. And again, if you're mentally flexible enough to look at other alternative options, you're doing exactly that. Point number 9. Today's topic, once again, is how journalism destroyed itself. Number 9 is citizen journalism. What is citizen journalism? Citizen journalism is material that we have to vet and find ourselves, coming from everyday people who are not connected to or paid for by any particular platform, but are putting out a message that is valuable and useful to a certain percentage of the audience. They have their own audiences, individual people. Me right now, if you're listening to me, I have an audience of my own. I am citizen journalism. I'm telling you what's happening. I'm giving you my interpretation of it. And there are people who want to hear it from me. There are people who want to hear it from him over there. There are people who want to hear it from her. There are people who want to hear it from those guys. And this is where we are. This is how the audience has gotten fragmented. And this is why I say there could be 100 people in a room, and every one of us 100 people is getting our information from a different source. That used to not be possible because there were only 4 or 5 platforms. Nowadays, there are millions of platforms. You have a million people getting information from a million different places. This is the end game of what we have to do these days. And when I say have to do, I don't mean publishing, I mean consuming. As consumers, now we have to do the work of going through all the material out there, deciding who and what to listen to and who and what we should believe. We didn't used to have to do this because, again, we knew we could trust this channel and this channel and this channel. Nowadays, we got to go through a million channels to find the ones we choose to trust because the main ones got compromised in this mix. So you got to be willing to take the extra step of figuring out where to get the information, deciding who's telling you the truth, and how to verify that what they're telling you is actually true, or just what you choose to believe. Most of the time, we're just choosing to believe things, not that we actually know. Someone tells you something happened in Seattle and you live in Chicago, you don't know if it happened. You just decide who you want to believe when they tell you something happened. Who do you trust enough that you believe what they tell you? That's really what this comes down to. See, this extra work, most human beings are not willing to do this work, which is why we're living in this world that has access to more information than ever, yet we are less intelligent and dumber than we have ever been as a whole, as a community. We are the dumbest we've ever been, even though we all have smartphones, even though we all have access to more information and more platforms and more places from which to get that information. We are less intelligent than we've ever been. How is that possible? It's possible because the more information we have access to, it doesn't necessarily, having more information Having access to more information does not necessarily mean that you're smarter because you still have to consume the information. Having access and consuming are two different things. How many of you have ever bought a book that you never opened and read? Okay, just because you have it doesn't mean you got the information. See, we have access to things, but we are not consuming them. One of the reasons we're not consuming them is because of the paradox of choice. We have so many options of places from which to consume that we never get around to doing any actual consumption. We spend all our time trying to choose which one we're going to consume. And before you know it, the time's up and we ain't even picked one yet. And you're scrolling through 100 different things on TikTok today, which means you didn't really go deep with any one thing that you heard or saw because you keep scrolling through trying to find the one that you want to settle on. Before you know it, time's up. You didn't even pick one. It's like being at a buffet. So much food there, you never pick anything. You never actually sit down and eat. You spend most of your time walking around a buffet looking at the food. This is what happens. We are less intelligent and dumber than ever as a society because we have to do extra work to get information. And human beings are lazy. I told you, people are lazy. They don't think and they don't read. These are three truths about human beings. You put people in a position where they have to do work to get something, then most of the people ain't going to get it because most people ain't doing the work. Human beings, by default, we do what is simple and what's easy. And that means listening to what serves our egos and emotions because it's like comfort food, makes us feel good, makes us feel better about what we already believe. Listening to something that will challenge what you believe and question everything that you thought was true takes mental effort. Most people are not signing up for anything that sounds or looks like mental effort. This is the reason why journalism is not. Social media helped, journalism itself helped, and the people working in journalism helped. Everybody helped contribute to this issue. Because journalism requires thinking, it requires people challenging themselves, and requires critical thinking. And people used to have an appetite for that. The appetite for critical thinking has gotten smaller and smaller as a society as we've introduced people to the drug of dopamine via smartphones. This is why we are more divided than ever these days. It's not because of any one network or any one politician or any one idea. It's because we are no longer on the same page or even on the same few pages or even in the same book when it comes to information and what is actually true versus what's not true. We can't even agree on facts these days, let alone truth, let alone sources. This is an indictment of journalism. I want to make sure that's clear. This is an indictment of journalism, and it can apply to a lot of aspects of life, including science. We touched on that, medicine, politics, academia, sports, and everything else. We can't even agree on the facts these days, let alone can we come to a conclusion on the truth. This is why we are as divided as ever. We are as unintelligent as ever because we are all addicted to dopamine. And dopamine simply means telling people what they want to hear. What you want to hear is not necessarily the truth. Most people ain't signing up for the truth. And journalists who should have been fighting against it, they should be telling you the same things that I've told you over this 3-part series. Most of them have abandoned their posts and instead jumped into the influencer game because, again, follow the money. They got bills too. They got car notes too. They got student loans to pay off. They got kids in daycare. All right, they got to pay that stuff off. They need their money. And people will sell their integrity for $1 relatively quickly. That's just human nature. All that said, let's recap today's class. It was part 3 of our 3-part series. How journalism destroyed itself. Number 7, consolidation and corporate influence over news reporting. As companies get smaller and they get bought up by other bigger companies and there are fewer companies who offer fewer options, now if you're a journalist, you have no choice but to do what the boss says or lose your job. And people got bills to pay, and many people will trade their integrity for the job. That's simply how it works. People will trade their integrity for a paycheck. All right, so you got to be careful if you work in a space that you are in which you have taken a vow to tell the truth, because as soon as you stop telling the truth, well, there goes your money. Or as soon as you start telling the truth, rather, there goes your money. And are you ready to step into the space of being an entrepreneur? I'm telling you one way or another, you're going to get thrown into it or you're going to step into it, but it's happening either way. Number 8, decline in public trust. The public trusts the media less because we can see that they're bullshitting. We can see that they're lying. We can see that they only tell you part of the story. Even if you don't tell up front, you can tell later on. Like, wait a minute, they told me it was this, but it's actually this, or they were lying to me the whole time. Which caused you to question everything they've ever told you. And number 9, citizen journalism. We have to vet and find it ourselves. It makes it harder on an everyday person because now we have to go look for information and we have to decide who we want to listen to. Once we decide on someone, well, our next door neighbor may have somebody else, and the neighbor on the other side has somebody else, and the person down the street has somebody else. Now we're all getting different information from different people. We can't even agree on the facts, let alone can we agree on the truth. This created an information war, and it's created a divide amongst people because of this. Our smartphones and access to all this information has actually made us the least intelligent society that we've ever had. All thanks to the death of journalism. All that said, folks, workonyourgameuniversity.com. You want to work with me directly, and you want to actually put your intelligence to good use and put it to use in a substantial way and serve people who need to be served at the level that you want to serve them and have them happy to get more of that service from you. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com, secure me as your direct coach, and let's get to work. Work on your game. Dre, all